How much did slaves in America cost in today's money? https://www.measuringworth.com/slavery.php https://www.measuringworth.com/slavery.php https://www.reddit.com/r/askhistorians/comments/1dp3cb/how_underscore much_did//today's/ www.rddit.com/askhistorians/comments/1dp3cb/how_much_did_cost_today's/ It varied by decade, and also depended on the age and sex of the slave, the most valuable slaves generally being males in their 20s. The first link claims that in 1850, the average price of a slave was $400, which is about $16,000 adjusted for inflation. https://www.officialdata.org/us/inflation/1850 question amount equals 400. The link claims $400 would be $114,000 in today's price, but it's unclear to me how they calculated that, and that seems wrong based on the other inflation calculators I can find. $14,000 to $240,000. A healthy, strong adult male? About as much as a piece of farm or manufacturing equipment, anywhere from $50150K depending on skills. Children? Much less, both because you have to feed, house, and clothe them until they're productive workers, typically children under 10 did minimal work, and because they might die of childhood illnesses before then. Women, again, depends on age and skill level. A lady's maid, seamstress, or cook is going to be valued more than a field hand. In The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn Jim learns he would be worth $800. I seem to recall someone doing the math and that figure was the equivalent of a nice luxury car today. $100 in 1850 is equal to almost $4,000 now, $3,954. Records show cost to be $40, $500 in 1850, so a $300 slave would cost around $12,000 in today's dollars. https://airnow.org/modern/Atlantic slave trade 1440-1870/43.php https://airnow.org/modern/Atlantic slave trade 1440-1870/43.php https://www.tshonline.org/handbook/entries/slavery https://www.tshonline.org/handbook/entries/slavery. Slave prices inflated rapidly as the institution expanded in Texas. The average price of a slave, regardless of age, sex, or condition, rose from approximately $400 in 1850 to nearly $800 by 1860. During the late 1850s, prime male field hands aged 18 to 30 cost on the average $1,200, and skilled slaves such as blacksmiths often were valued at more than $2,000. In comparison, good Texas cotton land could be bought for as little as $6 an acre. In an episode of Finding Your Roots, they find a bill of sale for an ancestor of Nass Rapper for $800 at the time in 1859. USBLS inflation calculator only goes back to 1913 and converts that to $26,121. This is going to sound fucked, but you can still buy slaves in Africa today, specifically in poorer areas like Togo and parts of Benin. You can purchase an unpaid domestic house servant for $350, $700 depending on quality. Modern-day slavers usually buy children for around $20 $100 depending on age and sex. Girls sell for higher. For obvious disgusting reasons. Rural Nigeria has a pretty big modern-day slaver problem that nobody seems to talk about. More than a new car. It was definitely a top 1% thing. Till slaves were actually pretty expensive. Up until this point I had incorrectly assumed they were very cheap. Wow, that's a really good question, and reading the comments I'm not surprised everyone didn't have that kind of money. OP, you should definitely read The Ledger and the Chain by Joshua Rothman if you want even more information on this topic. It really tells you how slave labor played a role in business in America. Since much of the slave trade was negotiated through bartering, it would be quite inaccurate to put cash value. For example, relatively poor indebted croppers could trade their season of cotton for the next round of slaves. The 1% could trade with cash. That was the tip of the iceberg. More info, https://www.discoveringbristol.org.uk/slavery/roots/bristol-to-africa/trade-goods/. OP needs to ask Clarence Thomas how much money it takes to keep up his lifestyle. Well, considering prisoners are slaver labor, I'll say about 13/HR. Incredibly expensive and had to be paid in cash. Modern credit system didn't exist. Why? Lol. What we do have to stop pretending though is that slavery still exists and people still make shitloads in selling people. We just bury our heads in the sand and pretend it's a thing of the past. Mandatory share for a question like this, https://youtu.be/9qjgtvv8vg. If you bought them directly from Africans, just some alcohol or European goods plus transportation. I always learned it was about as much as a car. People are throwing out a lot of numbers, but it varied from place to place and time to time. In 1808, the U.S. banned the international slave trade. Abolitionists were happy about that for obvious reasons. But slave owners were okay with it as well. Because restricting the supply of imported slaves increased the value of slaves that were already in the U.S. and helped domestic slave traders. From 1810 to 1860, hundreds of thousands of slaves were sent west, either on forced marches or on steamships. The smaller farms in Virginia, Maryland or the Carolinas could sell them at a profit to big plantations in Mississippi, Alabama, or other places on the expanding frontiers. The University of Richmond has a nice interactive map that shows these population shifts. https://dsl.richmond.edu/panorama/forced migration/